and welcome to this evening's search for our next BTC director. So just a quick overview of what we'll be doing this evening. We'll be thanking our committee members. We'll give you an overview of the search process. We'll have the opportunity to meet the two candidates and go through the questions with them. So there was a very long and involved process for this committee search, and it's been a very adventurous process. And as you can see here, we started off with a survey for the staff and community members, seeking qualities that they were looking for in their next BTC director. We collected all of that data and compiled it into the interview questions that you will be listening to this evening. The first interview step was a video interview that was pre-formatted by the candidates, sent to the interview committee members. And from those video chats, the finalists were selected. We had our first round of interviews earlier, and the candidates were moved forward to this evening's process, in which here we are now and the community forum. For those of you who have a scanner on your phone, this is a very quick link to the bios for the candidates you'll be seeing. You can also find the bios on our BSD website. If you go to our main page, there is a link for the BTC director search, and you will find their bios on that page as well. And at the end of the presentation, I will be putting this screen back up. We ask everyone for input on their thoughts, questions, comments, concerns about this evening's interview. And we ask that you have your input solicited by noon tomorrow, so that Superintendent Flanagan has time to review your input. Having said that, we're going to move over to the introductions for the interview committee.
Chris, would you like me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Pete, welcome. Thanks so much for being here tonight. I know you've had a long day. You probably have a million questions asked of you, so some of these may sound familiar, but I'd like to start by just allowing you to introduce yourself briefly, and then I have the first question would be from a BTC student.
Okay. My name is Pete Samuel. I've been in education for 25 years. Started in Central New York, and I've been at BFA in St. Albans ever since, working in the design technology program. My background is primarily around engineering design. Do a lot of 3D applications, lasers, 3D printers, plasma cutters, and such. While running the graphic design program, I've been the team leader there for 20 years. I've worked on a lot of strategic committees at BFA, and I'm very involved in leadership and strategic planning with both at BFA in the school and as the district evolved. We weren't a district when I started there, but we became a Maple Run, so I've been involved in that at various levels. I'm a longtime coach. I coached hockey, youth sports, alpine skiing. So I bring some of that philosophy of team play and mentorship, equal fair playing ground for everybody to the job. I have a family. I have a few daughters and two daughters, and a wife who is also in education in a different district. And I'm really excited for this opportunity because I think I'll wait till maybe what the question is to go.
I'm really excited for it too, actually. So the first question is, what qualities do you think would make you a good director? I think you were about to answer that.
Yeah. So I like working with young people first. That's always been, like I just mentioned, I've been a coach for a long time, and I only did that, coaches coach because they enjoy the sport and they enjoy working with young people, and same goes for teaching. So at first it's around students, it's student based, but also working with colleagues to help troubleshoot and figure things out as we go. You know, that's part of being a team, and being a team is important. You know, whether you're on the ice or on the field, or you're, you know, in an administrative office, or you're in a classroom, or whatever it is. So, you know, my passion for working with young people and being a team player are critical elements that I would bring to the table to be the director, as well as really having a passion to lead, a vision that this district really has a huge opportunity. You know, I read somewhere in some of the publications that this, you know, may be the biggest investment in 30 or 40 years in technical education. I have a well-versed background in building programs. When I got to BFA, there was, you know, old industrial arts, and we've really revamped that program over the last 20 plus years with support of administration and the school board superintendent. That really believed in my vision and my approach towards working with students and working with teammates and working within, you know, the structure of the district. So that in conjunction, as the teacher, I also and the department leader, I also worked hand in hand with the tech center, promoting their programs. You know, I was part of the public high school, but worked really hard to promote their programs as well and be a conduit into the tech center. So, you know, I have some background in working with the tech center, just not in a leadership capacity. So.
Right. That's great. No, I like the qualities that you bring. Thanks for bringing that out. During these difficult times, when we can't spend as much time together as we'd like, BTC is spread across 5 sites. How do you develop and maintain a dynamic and positive community among students and parents?
So, you know, first of all, being in 5 separate buildings, you know, it's thank God that the teachers have, you know, incredible passion to keep things going, because that's a very difficult position to be in. And not only for the educators, but, you know, also very much for the students, just, you know, being associated with different programs and, you know, hearing about different experiences through your, you know, your student colleagues is very important. So to maintain that spirit of education, that spirit of positive growth is going to be challenging. However, I really believe that in order to do that well, we have to know what the sending communities need. We have to know what they want. We have to know what their desires are. Big business is a wonderful thing, and it's, you know, it's a very positive part of the state. However, Vermont has always been unique and will continue to be so. And a very high percentage of small business in Vermont is just that, it's small business. So knowing what small businesses need in Underhill or Jericho or Richmond or Colchester or some of the other sending districts, I'm not going to go through and name all of them, but it is important. They need to have a voice at the table, and I think that they will. You know, I wonder what that voice would look like if and I don't know how much of a voice those sending communities have now, but to really be able to backpedal into that and understand those needs, I think would be a real asset to be able to enhance that camaraderie and integration of all the programs. To know, you know, it was Mount Mansfield's. I know that they have a big winter carnival. To know that was going on, and those students were jazzed for that, so we could celebrate that at our, you know, at BTC. And understand what that is and what it's all about, as one example.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. If selected for this position, what strategies would you use to develop your own leadership style and understanding of CTE?
Well, understanding people is, you know, that's a critical element of being a leader. You know, you can lead in a vacuum, and you can lead with an authoritarian rule behind the desk and say, this is the way it is. That's not me. It's not the kind of person I am. I believe very much in understanding. People have to teach to their passions. You know, the professionals that are part of the education community here, they're professionals in their field. They are teachers. and superior teachers, but they also have to recognize what the business industry wants them to deliver. So, there are some standards that the state outlines that are part of the leadership philosophy. So I don't have to reinvent the wheel when I'm coming into, if I were to come in as the leader. I won't have to reinvent the wheel about what leadership looks like. I would just have to make sure that we, as the group of professionals, is on the same page with what that looks like. And, that can be modified. If something isn't working, I think it's very important to have an avenue that people can access that, to be able to let us know in the leadership capacity that, okay, we hear what you're saying, but we're having a really difficult time in making that work. How can we do a better job together to make that work? So having the ability to access me or access the style of leadership, I think is going to be a critical element, especially as you mentioned, spread across 5 different areas. They're not going to, typically if we're in the same building, everyone will see me every day. And, that may happen, but it also may not happen. Some days it may, and some days it might not. But, I would certainly make a schedule where, I'm out integrated in those programs on certainly a weekly basis. And hopefully, a couple of times a week, I can make sure that I hit every location so that they're aware of what's going on. And I'm aware of what's going on in their classroom. I think that's important.
I do too. Yeah. Thank you, Pete.
Yep.
Hi, Pete. It's nice to see you again.
Hi. Same with you.
Yeah. All right. So I have the next 3 questions.
Okay.
Please describe a time when you gathered input from stakeholders before making a decision, how you used that input, and whether you would do anything differently if faced with the same circumstance. I can repeat that again as well.
That'd be great.
Okay. Please describe a time when you gathered input from stakeholders before making a decision, how you used that input, and whether you would do anything differently if faced with the same circumstance.
Well, several years ago, I ran the NEAS committee study at our school, which, if any of you have been through that, that is a monster of a task to perform, and not one that educational colleagues are really all that excited to go through that 2.5 to 3 year process. So that was something that I co-chaired with a colleague in my school, and this was a process that I know some schools that has started to go by the wayside to some degree because of all the changes that have happened in education. But going into that, there's a lot of data collection, and the way to gather that data is tricky. And I think we went into it in a way. This is the way we're going to do it. We're going to standardize it so that everything's the same. Well, collecting culinary projects or art projects, or some of the projects that I do that are more applied work, are much different than putting some of the general ed work in a binder for people to view. So when we realized that our strategy to do that wasn't going to work, it's pictures are worth 1,000 words, right? But when you can pick up a student project and you can look at it, and you can look at the curriculum that was delivered to be able to have a student apply that knowledge that they took from that and be able to produce a product, a picture, that's fine. But if you can develop a gallery for people to go and observe these products, that's what we did based upon some input and feedback that we were given from our colleagues. It was impactful. It was impactful to the visiting committee of the thoughtfulness that went into it, not from my approach, but the thoughtfulness that went into it, because you're really showcasing the students' work. We weren't showcasing ourselves, that we could, facilitate putting some information together. That's kind of easier than doing that. So if I did anything different in that circumstance, I think I would have solicited information and ideas before we went into the process of how we were going to do that, because quite honestly, I think because the task is so big, we only had a certain amount of time to spend doing certain things. So, the speed of light at which educational change happens, that we didn't want to get bogged down in a quagmire of ideas and ideas and ideas and ideas and not have a way to draw out the ones that would really work. So, really having a strategic plan and making sure that people, that your stakeholders, when you solicit their input, that they understand what the goals that we're facing are, what direction that we need to go, so that their input is direct and it's timely in a way that supports the direction that we're going. Sometimes when you ask for input, it could possibly be a waste of time if people get off on a tangent and we're not really discussing the task at hand. So, making sure the stakeholders are aware of the direction that we're going, the vision or the mission of whatever the specific thing is that we're talking about, and keeping that meeting or that community forum keeping it on the rails so that people are focused and it's a good use of everybody's time.
Hey, Ashley, I'm going to interrupt for just a quick second, and please accept my sincerest apologies. Dealing with the stress of the technology, I forgot to mention at the very beginning, due to the half an hour time frame, it was suggested about 4 minutes per question. Now, I'm not inclined to say 4 minutes per question because I don't want to cut you off, but I do want to suggest a friendly reminder of making sure that we get all of the questions in within the time frame allotted.
Yeah, and that's fun. I have no problem if you say that's enough, we won't need to move on. I'm okay with that because the people deserve to hear the questions. I think that's important too. So I'll try to time myself so that I don't get off on a tangent myself.
Okay.
How about that?
I mean, at the very end, I may have to say time's up, but
That's fine.
We'll proceed accordingly.
Okay.
Thanks for your understanding.
I'm ready.
So Peter, for context, there are 9 total questions, and I am asking you question number 6.
Okay.
Being a clear communicator was raised as one of the most important characteristics of BTC's next director. What expectations would you set for what expectations would you set for teacher communication with students and families?
That is a good question. And I know myself, being a teacher for 25 years, it's not that teachers don't want to do it. It's that sometimes the time is what gets us, right? And, I teach all day. I help some students after school, and I need to run off to pick up, my family member or get my daughter to practice or pick up 5 kids from practice or whatever it is. That sometimes is the hindrance of allowing teachers to have and offer communication to parents, especially, and to students sometimes as well. So I don't have a direct answer of this is how I'm going to do this. I think this is one of those areas, especially because of technology now, that there's maybe an easier way to do it that I don't know, or that maybe 2 people at BTC are using, but the rest of the people haven't been informed of what's working well. So I think that is something that we could let technology dictate the application, potentially, at least maybe as a conversation starter to look into. I think as long as we're on the same goals as a group, that we know that it's important, and this is the bare minimum. This is the acceptable level that we're at. We really want to be here. We're going to start here, and we're going to work in incremental steps until we reach this, and let parents know along the way, like, this is one of our strategic goals for how we're going to improve our communication, so that they're aware of that we're working on it. And then we can ask them, because a lot of times we don't know, right? So we can have a metric and say, has communication been better? Has it been more uniform across the school, in the way that teachers are reaching out to both your student or yourself? So I'd look for that possibly.
Great, thank you. And I made an error. I swapped the order of question.
That's okay.
So How would you envision working with the larger Chittenden County community in support of BTC? And then another part of that is, how have you worked with partners in the past to support your students? I'll read that one again.
I got it.
Oh, you got it?
I wrote quicker.
Okay.
Now I lost the last part. Working with, what was the second part? Working with what?
How have you worked with partners in the past to support your students?
Okay. Okay, so I'm from Chittenden County. I grew up in Chittenden County, and you know, it sometimes drives my family a little nuts when we go out somewhere and they're like, "Oh, Pete, oh, didn't you go here? Weren't you involved in this?" When you grow up in a community and you're involved, I mean, how many thousands and thousands of students have taught? I teach in Franklin County, but you know, we're right next to one another, and you know, I coached in Chittenden County as well. So I think working with a larger community is exciting to me, and you know, when you go in and you're just soliciting information from them, they don't know, might not know who I am, right? So odds are that they won't. So when you go in with ideas about how to collect information that's important to them, and you just listen, and you don't tell them that you can't do it, you don't tell them that you won't do it, you don't tell them that you don't have the money for it, you just listen, because you know, I really see this tech center as bigger than just Chittenden County. I see it as influencing the state on a whole. You know, there's industry in Chittenden County that's in other parts of the world. So, you know, strategically, I think that yes, Chittenden County is incredibly important in all of our setting schools, 100%. However, you know, looking at this on a state level, I think would also be prudent for everybody to acknowledge that and gather some needs from them around the state as well. So I will look forward to working with them and just starting to develop you know, a needs-based approach to the way to communicate and the way that we can, you know, work at BTC to continually support their student and their local needs. So I've been really fortunate enough to work on a number of patents with students throughout my career, with community members. And I think that, okay, one girl had an idea for a horizontal wind turbine, and she audited my class. She wasn't even in my class. She audited my class to learn how to use SolidWorks, which is a 3D design software program. So she did, and she's so engaging and energetic that, you know, we continued to work on this throughout the summer, and we set her up to go present at the Makers Fair at Shelburne Farms for the Inventors Award. So she competed against 15 engineers from around the state. I think there was one other student in it, and she won. So she won $5,000 to increase the next iteration of her project, which she did, and she worked with a local fabricator to fabricate that. Long story short, she got a patent on it in December. It got her into the college of her choice, which she didn't get in on paper, but when she presented what her project was, then that was you know, that was telling. So it's just one of the stories. I'm done. I was 10 seconds over on that one. So
hi, Pete. So I'm going to be asking the next couple questions here. First question: incidences of racial slurs being used in schools are on the rise across the country. Imagine that while the director at BTC, a teacher reports finding a racial slur written on a bathroom wall. Part one of the question: what would be your initial next steps for the student who used the term?
So we know the student who used the racial slur in your question.
Yes.
Well, I would hope that I had a relationship with a student so I could let them know it's not acceptable. This isn't a you shouldn't have done it type of moment. It's not who BTC is. It's not creating an equitable place where students have access to learn. They're all going to bring differences to the table, but demoralizing somebody using a slur or a gesture or a picture or anything else isn't something I would tolerate, and I would work very, very hard to build inclusivity when I started there. So I would like to think that would never happen, but of course we know that you can wish, and then there's reality. So I would be disappointed. I would be sad that somebody felt that they need to stoop to a level that low to hurt somebody else, and that's not something that would be tolerated. Or I think also in that vein, that's something that I've watched that go away on a different level of equity. The slur, using the R word, was a thing that was an accepted practice for people didn't think that it hurt people, and has been something in my school that has all but been eradicated because of some of the programs that were instituted and some of the learning that took place at my school. So I think there's opportunity to use student leaders to teach why it's not an acceptable practice, and really try to promote this systemic change. And students know that students need to be leaders too, to help prevent that. It can't just be, leadership saying, no, you can't do that. That's not okay. It's got to be a systematic change the paradigm of it's not an acceptable practice.
Second part of the question, what next steps would you take to support the community at large so that all students feel like our school is a safe space to learn and grow?
You're talking about Chittenden County, all sending schools? Kind of.
Well, I think the community at large, the BTC community at large.
So how would I support the community at large to grow?
Yeah, what next steps would you take to support the community at large so that all students feel like our school is a safe space to learn and grow?
Promoting student voice is important because, as grown-ups, we can think that we're educated and we know everything. I don't know everything about diversity and equity and equality. I know a lot, but man, student voice and giving them the opportunity to present the things that are important to them and what they know and the way that their speak is, so we can understand it. That would be my first role, is to help create a team of students that we're passionate about making sure that they have a voice at the school, and their voice is part of the change process at the school, if need be, and that they feel supported through their voice and things that they want to bring to the table to have leadership help facilitate. That would be one of my primary things. Obviously, understanding needs is important. Open dialogue, open communication it's so essential. So making sure there was a process for that. So if students said, hey, look, we really want to take some actionable steps on this. This is a national conversation. How can we do that? We need to have a process in place as a team to be able to explain to them what they need to do, not just say it's a good idea, hang up a poster. I want to do that. I want to have a process in place that they know and understand and can follow.
Okay. So next question. In the survey at the start of the selection process, several current BTC staff members told us that it was important to them that their next leader has a plan for holding teachers accountable for meeting their goals. How would you support staff in meeting the performance goals they set for themselves and their students?
It's a great question. So anybody can be told they need to be held accountable, but not everybody knows how to make that accountability successful. So I see my role as the leader, if people are going to have different strategic goals. So if one person's goal is managing behavior in the classroom, another person's goal is creating more proficiency-based curriculum delivery and reporting and recording and reporting, then I would see part of the role of my team to create an avenue for that to happen. So if we identify out of 24 staff, there's 8 that really want to work on curriculum, there's 5 that want to work on behavior management, and there's 5 that want to work on communication to parents. So maybe we partner them up with somebody else that can work on their strategic goal. So they're not learning in a vacuum is hard. It's hard to motivate yourself sometimes. It's hard to understand if you're doing the right thing. Just having a conversation with somebody else. Hey, I started doing it this way. Oh, you're doing it that way. Oh, that makes sense. And you can bring that model together and create more success for them and for the students, right? So when teachers feel like they're being successful, they're going to be motivated in the classroom to spend more time creating more unique content for students to experience, more exciting, have more time to work on it. When teachers get bogged down in administrative tasks because teachers have to have goals, without supporting their goals, how can they support their student goals? So I think that would be a place that I would start, is trying to formulate some breakouts of who wants what, and how we can utilize each other's professionalism to help get people to that point.
Okay. Last question I have. Are there any closing thoughts or reflections on your day with BTC you'd like to share?
You ask in-depth questions. So I tried to prepare for this and did as much as I could. And I think you really hit a lot of the core areas of education. I think it came off to me that it was very student-centered, while at the same time that we need to pay attention to the community. We need to pay attention to the communities because we need to support their needs. It's not just enough to have a kid take a school bus to BTC and be in a program. We need to make sure that we're supporting whatever needs the board says as identified as a necessity for teachers to meet. So, making sure that that's done, I think is important. So I think that, and I think I was struck today when I asked a question about, what's the most positive thing at the school, without hesitation, a number of people said it's our passion. It's our passion to teach. So without that, it's more of an uphill battle. I would think, to try to get everybody on the same page when people just want what's best for young people to work and be successful and learn what failure looks like and how to achieve through that, and be persistent, is somewhere where I would want to be. That's along the same mentality that I follow in life and in education. And I think that I was pleasantly, I won't say surprised, it's not the right word, but I was very glad to hear that that was kind of the beat, the kind of the pulse of the tech center, that's where it fell. So with that, I think, changing some directions to tweak a few things is, there's a lot of opportunity there with that passion. That was the only one. Do you want me to go on?
That's last for me.
Okay.
Well, Peter, thank you very much for your time this evening. Just a brief update on our schedule. I know that Superintendent Flanagan is anxious to move forward, and we'll be looking forward to the community and the committee's feedback regarding this evening's interview. We do expect to be reaching out to folks within the next day to let them know if they're moving forward. So we appreciate your patience.
I really want to say thanks for the opportunity. It's been quite a process. throughout this process, I think I've realized, how much I would love the opportunity to work with this team, with the communities, and, with the students. I think, I think BTC is at a precipice to really punch it forward, and I'd love to be part of that. So thank you for your time tonight, and look forward to hearing from you in the days to come.
Cool. Thanks very much, Pete.
Thanks.
Have a great night.
You too. Bye.
Okay, we have a couple minutes before our next candidate shows up. Quick question for you guys. At this afternoon's staff forum, were the candidates given questions ahead of time for this evening? Okay,
Not for this evening.
not this evening's questions?
Mhm.
Okay,
Just the afternoon's questions.
okay, thank you for clarifying.
I didn't introduce myself. I felt like I should have done that probably. I mean, he knew who I was, but I don't know. There's 7 people who are watching.
Well, 4 of them are us.
Uh-huh.
Shout out to the other 3 watching. How are you all? Actually, I know that there's one of our Toussaint partners is watching as well, because we just texted briefly, but I wonder where she's watching from.
There was one YouTube viewer and myself a moment ago. So
Okay, maybe that's it.
It is nice weather. Just gonna say.
Beautiful up there. Yep. Now we play the hurry up and wait game.
So 6:50 we're expecting Jason.
Yes.
Awesome.
I just received a message from Claire, which says, remind everyone we will use the YouTube link for public to watch who were unable to make it at this time period. Oh, so the YouTube link will be available for the public to watch at a later time.
Correct. I'll share that reminder during our closing comments. I'm going to pop off for a second and try to give Jason a call.
Desire to go, hello, welcome to my YouTube channel.
I just couldn't help myself. Trying to keep my brain active here.
I didn't need to call him. He just popped up, so I'm going to let him in. Good evening, Jason. How are you?
Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Okay, I heard you were a little under the weather earlier. Hope you're a little better.
I'm feeling much better. Thanks for asking.
Good, good.
Wouldn't miss this for the world.
At 7 o'clock at night.
Yep. So welcome to the BTC. This is the community forums portion of our director search. And we're going to launch right into the first question.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jason. Marianne Sheehan from the Vermont Business Roundtable.
Hi, Marianne.
Good to see you. Thank you for being with us tonight. I know it's probably been a really long day for you.
Yeah, that's all right. Glad to be here.
So we have some questions for you, but I'd like to start by allowing you to introduce yourself, and then I'll ask a few questions. Then Ashley will ask a few, and Jason.
Okay, great. Yeah, good evening. My name is Jason Reed. I've been working in the Burlington School District for the past 16 years, primarily in the Horizons Alternative High School program. And if you're not familiar with that, it is an alternative program for Burlington High School that is off campus. We're currently located out on North Avenue, St. Mark's Church. And we generally have 10th through 12th graders at Horizons. And I have shared students with BTC over the 15 or 16 years I've been here. And I counted about 7 programs, one of which doesn't exist anymore. So I've gotten to know BTC through that, through those connections. And prior to that, I worked in 2 vocational learning settings. One is a Job Corps Center in Virgins, which is funded by the Department of Labor and offers both education credential completion, diploma or GED, as well as vocational training. And there are many parallels actually to the programs here at BTC with what they offer, but there's some additional offerings like urban forestry and building trades, which is something not offered at BTC. And before that, had nearly a decade at New England Culinary Institute in restaurant operations and management, working with both associate's degree students and bachelor's degree students. The associate's degree students were working in culinary arts, and the bachelor's degree students in restaurant management. And my last job there was overseeing the bachelor's degree program on 2 campuses, one in Essex and one in Montpelier. And personally, I do some volunteer work with Therapy Dogs of Vermont. I'm a volunteer snowboard instructor for the Chill Foundation, and have lived in Vermont for a long time and around Chittenden County a long time.
That's great. Thank you so much. So the first question is from a current BTC student who wants to know what qualities you think you have that would make you a good director.
I love that you surveyed the students for questions. The qualities that I would bring, especially from a student's perspective, I think, is a lot of enthusiasm. I like to get to know students really personally and start making those connections from day one. Certainly a goal to learn names, but I'd also like to know students more thoroughly than that. And I do a lot of observing of students, so I understand how they're approaching their school day when I see them. There's indicators when they may need some check-in. I also, like to, with sending schools, I would like to be able to make recognition of that for students. And what's new at CBU this morning? How was your bus ride from Milton? I heard the bus forgot you for a second. And just make those personal connections so that when it comes to more serious things, they see me as a support person and someone that they can come to and really feel like the entire BTC staff supports them, from their instructors up to the director. And I have brought that quality to Burlington in my years at Horizons, and have kept a lot of relationships, long-term relationships with graduates that kind of give me that indication that I have been able to make those connections, and still get calls and messages from students in college, students in the military, wherever they happen to be, so they can check in, or sometimes they still need support and they know that they can reach out to me. So those are qualities that I would bring specifically to students, and I think they'll feel that, and that enthusiasm.
That's great. Thank you. During these challenging times when we can't spend as much time as we'd like together, we at BTC are spread across 5 sites. How do you develop and maintain a positive, dynamic community among students and families?
Yeah, it does present a challenge, as you said, to be scattered. And I think we've gotten so used to calls like this or meetings like this where there are people there, but it is a much different thing to be in person. So my commitment to the students is and to their faculty members is to get out to those sites on a regular basis to understand what they're doing, understand what they're learning, what they were so interested and passionate about that they applied to BTC. And I will communicate with their sending schools and of course parents, so that parents know that I can be a resource for them if they have questions, if I can assist with things, if a faculty member is busy and they need some information right away, that I can assist with that. But I like to be available. I do not like to leave parents wondering about things. I like to have clear communication about upcoming schedules, upcoming events, and be sure that parents aren't wondering what is happening. And I know with different sending schools, I know with BHS specifically, class schedules change and flip days upside down, and just, whatever I need to do to make sure parents understand and other caregivers where their children will be or are expected to be at any given time.
If selected for this position, what strategies do you think you could use to help develop your own leadership style?
Yeah, my strategies will be, first of all, to do some more learning. I'll immediately enroll in a parallel leadership program so that I'll have that theoretical information coming in addition to the leadership roles I've had for the past 20 years. And I can explain the leadership pieces at Horizons. They don't quite reveal themselves through my job title, but I can do that down the road if the time permits. And so my other strategies will be developed through understanding where BTC is currently, understanding what it needs to stabilize, and as you said, be in 5 different programs, maintain its integrity so that students, parents want to continue to enroll in BTC, and to be sure that faculty are feeling confident in how we're moving along in their satellite locations. And they've dealt with so many temporary locations to help feel stabilized. And so my strategy is to listen, and then I will develop some action items from those actions or listening and observations to see where we need to go.
That's great. Thank you, Jason. Ashley?
Hi, Jason. Nice to see you again. I have the next 3 questions, but this first one is a 3-parter. All right, please describe a time when you gathered input from stakeholders before making a decision, how you used that input, and whether you would do anything differently if faced with the same circumstance. Do you want to read that again?
Yeah, if you don't mind, that'd be helpful, Ashley. Thank you.
Yeah. Please describe a time when you gathered input from stakeholders before making a decision, how you used that input, and whether you would do anything differently if faced with the same circumstance.
That's an intense question. I like it. This committee has been full of great, thorough questions. I'm going to go back previous to BSD just to connect to some of the vocational learning environments I've been in. And we had a big question at Job Corps around students who needed additional learning support. Because they're not a public school, students who are eligible for special education services or may have accommodations in 504 plans were not being thoroughly acknowledged, and at times not acknowledged at all. And so I wanted to improve that and develop a student support task force. And so some of the stakeholders involved academic teachers, vocational teachers, the center director at the time. And I also reached out to public school teachers who could offer some more perspective on what IEPs and 504s looked like coming out of their school, because we had students from sending schools all over New England, and they were gracious enough to offer that support. And so there was no obligation, but I felt a need to push that forward so that they had the best chance at earning their diploma or their GED, and they could better access their vocational training. And that, I don't know if it still exists there, but it was, it felt really ethical to work on it, like it was an ethical obligation. And the things that I think I would do differently is I was pretty gentle in moving it forward. I was afraid of kind of shaking the organizational structure a little bit and not creating a public school when they were very clear they were not a public school. And if I had to do it over, I would have been a little more forceful because the need was pretty immediate. And there's ways to finesse that without coming in and burning bridges with the stakeholders or folks who are running the center as contractors. But it took too long, and I would have tried to push that timeline faster because of the immediate need.
I was listening to your response and I forgot that I'm also asking the next question. How would you envision working with the larger Chittenden County community in support of BTC? And how have you worked with partners in the past to support your students?
Great questions. I can envision, if I were to be offered this role, starting with our sending schools and making necessary connections there. I think there's a lot for me to learn from the BTC staff already, and from the advisory board in terms of connections that I can make. I'm not afraid to reach out to individuals who I think could benefit BTC and mentor that connection process and ask them to have a cup of coffee, short meeting, just to start to build that network. And I think the instructors have created a lot of connections around the county that network can continue to build. So it's a matter of learning from the faculty, learning from the advisory board, reaching out to folks like Bob Travers at Essex Tech to begin to build that web. Did I hit all the parts there, Ashley?
I think so.
Well, there was a second part. I'm sorry. There was a second part where I have reached out to partners to support students. Earlier, I spoke to the BTC faculty and staff about the desire for more college access and more college introduction for students who may not have that information, or it may not be part of their thinking coming into high school. And so I connected with Vermont Adult Learning, CCV, a partner at Burlington High School, who's an expert in dual enrollment and working with CCV, UVM, and those types of schools, and wanted to create our own introduction to college and career course that CCV could have a professor, would be specific to our students. Through the partnership, we ended up splitting that course with both Horizons and Vermont Adult Learning to make it work so that we had a critical number of students there. And so through those 4 partnerships, we were able to make that happen, and actually didn't cost the district anything. We were able to access some grant money for that. And I can't take responsibility for that. That was CCV and VSAC, but they were able to commit to that. And I also had gone to the Equity Council, which existed in the Burlington district at the time. The equity office looks much different, but the district had an equity council at the time. And I brought the proposal to them because I wanted their seal of approval on it, that it was an equity issue to have more students have information and access to college and further career training.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Last question from me. Being a clear communicator was raised as one of the most important characteristics of BTC's next executive director. What expectations would you set for teacher communication with students and families?
Yeah. I'll just echo a little bit of what I said before is I've said to some of you in this group before that when dealing with parents and other care providers for the youth coming into BTC, I view it as there's a customer service element to it, that we really need to maintain those relationships, keep people informed, and I would ensure that the faculty do that. And I think there are times when faculty are buried, and I would hope that they could reach out and say, hey, I need to get back to this aunt who's really concerned about their student. Do you have a second to call them or reach out to them? And then I'll follow up tomorrow once I get through this current project I'm working on. But it's really important. And, obviously our students will be coming from any number of schools. And so closing that distance and making the parents feel part of the BTC community is really important. And I think those timely communications are really, they're crucial to that. Thanks, Ashley.
And now we're at my 3 questions.
Okay.
Okay, first question is multiple questions, but I'm going to read the scenario first, and then I'll ask the first part of the question. So, incidences of racial slurs being used in schools are on the rise across the country. Imagine that while the director of BTC, a teacher reports finding a racial slur written on a bathroom wall. What would be your initial next steps for the student who used the term?
So we know the student who, yeah. Well, I'll just stick to the question. Your question was, what would be the first action with the student? And that severe behavior, that would be drop everything and find that student immediately, because there needs to be a discussion with that student. And I also would want to deal with the slur so that other students are protected from it, and whatever had to happen in that situation, that could be taken care of. But in terms of working with that student, I have a very restorative approach to working with students, but there also needs to be a firm message that is not acceptable. The goal should be to keep kids in school at all times, and suspensions are limited for very egregious things. But there would be a long conversation there. And I think the next steps would be determined by how the student was receiving it, what their intention was. And, in a true restorative environment, we don't want to look to past behaviors to kind of compound their behaviors. But in this situation, it is warranted to look into past discipline records and determine if this is a repeat offense. And depending on the situation, I would be with that student, and in that case, I would need a family member the next day to process before the student came back into school or back into their program, to determine how we can move forward with a plan where that type of behavior would not be allowed. If I had a faculty member who knew that student really well, I think it would be important, or another staff member, really important to have that person present for that dialogue, because we want to rid ourselves of that behavior, but we also want to make sure that those students have some support there, and can feel like they can enter back into the learning community when their behavior can be appropriate. And it may require a bigger discussion. It may require some repairing with other students who felt the impact of that racial slur, and facilitating those discussions, and if it is a compounded incident, it may be important to get our restorative practitioners that the district, has to assist with something like that. They're there waiting to help with these things, and we can utilize them. And we also have to ask the question about if it raises to bullying or harassment, and then proceed with those protocols.
I almost stopped you because I felt like you were going to wander into this part of the question, but I let it go, and you didn't. You kind of ran along there. But so what next steps would you take to support the community at large so that all students feel like our school is a safe space to learn and grow?
Yeah, it would be important to deal with the immediate location first, because there are so many locations, but we can't forget that type of information can get out, and it can spread, and other students and families and teachers and staff may hear about these incidents. So it would be a time to do some real community healing. I do, in these cases, like the process of using restorative circles or restorative dialogues, where students can have a voice in how they were impacted, and even if they weren't directly impacted, how they feel it affects the community, and then giving them some voice in terms of how we shape the community moving forward. But of course, any adult involved in that conversation, myself included, have to make it very clear that that's not acceptable, and we will be committed to making BTC a safe space for all students.
Lost my video there. Okay. Next question. In the survey at the start of the selection process, several current BTC staff members told us that it was important to them that their next leader has a plan for holding teachers accountable for meeting their goals. How would you support staff in meeting the performance goals they set for themselves and their students?
Yeah. That's going to be unique to the individual. And I say that not to waver on the answer, but those goals don't get met for a variety of reasons. And so step one is to determine why they're not being met. There are times when people are not doing the work they need to be doing. But what you can discover in finding that information out is perhaps what's behind that. And just this school year, you can hear stories of people having to take big chunks of time away from work because students their own children are homesick from school for periods of time. Perhaps they've gotten ill, they have family complications, and there may not be ill intention or avoidance in fulfilling those goals. The other thing, there are times when our time shifts. We write those goals early in the year, and then our attention shifts because an opportunity comes up in another area that's kind of ripe for the picking right then. And me personally, I actually modified a goal from the beginning of the school year to this year because I was able to take a different path and wanted to refocus my goal. And so finding out what those reasons are. But if there is a teacher who has some shortcomings in terms of performance or meeting those goals, going through some progressive steps with them to help support them. And if it's not hurting a student, if it's not burning down the relationships among the faculty and staff at BTC, we can take time to develop those steps. If it's something more egregious, we'll have to accelerate kind of a behavior discipline plan, if that's the case.
Okay, so my last question: are there any closing thoughts or reflections on your day with BTC you'd like to share?
Yeah. First of all, I mean, I have known a lot of the BTC staff for years, some more closely than others, and some short interactions about students. And sitting in front of that group of faculty and staff was, I kind of was sitting there in awe of the talent that was there in those various disciplines, as well as what I know that students have done to extend themselves, or what the faculty has done to extend themselves supporting students. So I've appreciated that. And, one of the things I wrote in my bio, which sounds maybe odd when you're applying for a vocational learning environment, is that I believe that schools are generalists, should prepare generalists, students as generalists. That sounds odd when a vocational program is specializing in a field, but what I love and why I'm drawn to BTC is even though students are specializing, there is still an effort and a focus on providing students with academic skills, with communication skills, with personal growth, so that if they want to grow in that field, if they want to shift out of that field as they age or they find other experiences as they grow, that they'll have the skills to do that. And the other thing that it can happen in some of these trades is, unfortunately, if you're injured, you may have to pivot your work life. That's true for many vocations. And I do sit in awe that BTC continues to be focused on both the specialization in a field and those academic personal growth and communication skills that will serve students well in their futures. So I think I'll leave with that, because I do have a tendency to ramble.
I was just pausing long enough to make sure you were done talking, because I certainly don't want to interrupt you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. So thank you for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate your time as well, especially at this hour, and appreciate the folks, community members who have tuned in as well. Appreciate the time.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. So just a quick update on the schedule. We'll be reaching out to folks who are moving forward to the superintendent interviews. So we anticipate reaching out to you very soon with next steps.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jason.
All right. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening and participating in our search. Superintendent Flanagan and the BTC committee are very interested in your feedback. And so momentarily, I'm going to be putting up on the screen the QRC, as well as a link, which will give you access to the feedback forum. It's important to note that this link will be deactivated at noon tomorrow, as we need time for Superintendent Flanagan to review your feedback. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope you all have a wonderful evening.